Good evening, and welcome to the Cabinet of Fever Dreams. Tonight, a tale of parks, joggers, and neon. The Neon Man Trilogy was originally released February of 2020 and is read to you tonight by me, Mike J. Langer, with musical backing by Petra Merdian and Carl Casey of White Bat Audio. If you want to help this video spread its wings through the dark skies of the YouTube algorithm, please comment Neon and smash that like button. If you'd like for our digital paths to cross again, feel free to hit that subscribe button and make that notification bell chime. Also, if you're a long-time listener of the channel, stick around till the end of the video for an update about the coming weeks. With all that out of the way, strap on your jogging shoes, pop in your earbuds, and get ready to be terrified. The park outside of my apartment has always been a curiosity. Built in the middle of Soviet-era housing projects, it provides a hint of green in a sea of grey cement. The trees of the park grow thick enough to block out the outside world, but if you look closely enough, you can see groupings of joggers running around the park's trails. I've been watching the joggers for the past couple of weeks. Dressed in drab running gear, they looked exhausted but tranquil. As if by running they had managed to tap into something primal, something that brought peace to their lives. I desperately wanted to be one of them. Life wasn't going great. I had quit my job to become a freelance illustrator, and what was once my hobby had become a daily chore. Most of my time was spent avoiding drawing and watching whatever half-baked series the algorithm recommended to me. I was smoking more, sleeping less, and the idea of taking personal responsibility about how I use my time weighed me down into bed. Starting to jog every day and quitting smoking were my New Year resolutions. I would get a regular exercise routine going, clear out my lungs, and maybe, just maybe, fit in meditation and a healthy diet somewhere along the way. In the end, none of that happened. In the end, I met the Neon Man. I woke up January 1st with a splitting headache and a mouth that tasted like an ashtray. Whatever excitement I had about living a healthy lifestyle was washed out with the booze I drank on New Year's Eve. Yet I knew if I didn't stick to resolutions on the 1st, I wouldn't stick to my resolutions on the 2nd. I binged through a handful of motivational videos, listened to monologues about how I am the master of my own destiny, and how through hard work I can make a better life for myself. By noon I was out the door, high on self-help tapes. Being the master of my destiny was a lot harder than the motivational videos made it seem. By the time I reached the park, I already felt like I was teetering on the edge of death. Crossing the road, I was narrowly missed by a bus. My mind was completely focused on the act of moving my heavy feet. There was a distillery in my mouth that wanted out. My muscles burned and my head spun. I collapsed 3 benches into the park entrance. Leaning back on a bench, I could feel every cigarette I smoked last night tap my lungs goodbye. For a couple of heartbeats, I felt like I might be on the verge of a stroke, but as my breath returned, I calmed down. Sitting there, covered in a thin layer of sweat, I watched the joggers. Even though I had not managed an actual run, I felt like getting to the park was a reasonable start. Even sitting there felt calming. Outside of the passing bus lines, it felt like I was in some little bubble protecting me from the city. The joggers occasionally tripped or had to slow down to catch their breath, but it felt like we were all engaged in some peaceful, primordial ritual. I watched a tranquil wave of gray tracksuits. Then, I saw the Neon Man. He jogged past other runners with surprising speed. His stubby form didn't make him look like a good candidate for physical activity. His arms were too short, his legs were too pudgy, yet he outpaced the most athletic-looking of runners. Clumps of fat bounced around in his neon green jogging suit. He sped past everyone else on the trail and headed straight towards me. "Stop running! Go home!" He had a pair of wraparound sunglasses on his head, the kind that I would imagine a stepdad who is really into fishing to wear. I could see a reflection of myself in them. "Sorry?" a mirror image of me asked. This set him off. He started stomping on the ground in anger. "I warned you!" His stomps grew heavier. "Stop running! Go home!" With every stomp, his whole body jiggled. Layers of fat bounced up and down inside of their neon green prison as the pounding of his feet grew faster. There was something odd about his yelling, as if the words didn't really hold any meaning for him, as if he was simply trying to make noise to frighten me. I warned you! I warned you! I warned you! Before I could come up with an answer, his angry stomps turned mobile. He jogged away from me, still yelling, I warned you! I warned you! I warned you! He disappeared behind the trees and his voice soon faded. No one in the park had noticed. They were entirely too focused on their own running to take in anything else. In a sea of headphones, no one noticed me or the neon man. I left soon after. Whatever tranquility the park provided was taken away by the outburst of the strange green-clad man. I was scared he would come back and stick me with a switchblade or something. I walked back to my apartment. Inspiration just wasn't flowing when I got home. I wanted to get some light sketching done and try to drum up some commission work, but the internet led me into a procrastination rabbit hole. I got out about 6 hours later, having watched a dozen video essays about a children's TV show featuring cats in space that I had never seen. I felt like trash. My knees hurt from the minuscule amount of exercise I had done that day, and my lungs had cleared out enough for them to crave another cigarette. I went into another rabbit hole, one made of doubts about one's value as a human being. I would have gone to sleep chronically unhappy, but instead, I scrolled past a video of a championship domino stacker. The video started with impressive domino structures being tumbled. Seeing those meticulously planned sculptures was impressive enough, yet the true shock of the video came when the author of those sculptures was shown. He had no hands. Apparently his whole life people were telling him that he shouldn't stack dominoes if he has no hands, but he loved what he did and made do with his mouth. Now he was a champion domino stacker. He followed his dreams and didn't let anything get him down. Where were the naysayers now? Probably dead, in poverty. I got a rush of inspiration. If he could achieve his dream and become the master of his own destiny, so could I. I had feet, and those feet were made for running. I crushed and flushed the pack of cigarettes I kept in case I wanted to start smoking again. Within 5 minutes of finishing the domino video, my laptop was closed and I was in bed. I was going to get the best rest possible for my next run. No one was going to tell me what I can and can't do. If only that domino player gave up on his dreams. If only I never stumbled upon that video. Things would have turned out much better. Instead, the domino player was living his best life on the other side of the globe, and I was dreaming sweet dreams of calm jogs. The neon man completely slipped my mind. He shouldn't have. There was a drizzle out the next day. The park was virtually empty. Still high off of my motivation boost from the domino player, I decided that a little bit of drizzle wouldn't stop me from running. I geared up, watched 3 videos about tips for beginner joggers, and set out on my run. I made my way to the park with much greater ease than the day before. I paid attention to my breathing, didn't push the pace of the run past my comfort level, and held to a variety of other rules that YouTubers in nice jogging suits recommended. I slowly made my way through the park. My lungs hurt, and my legs were feeling heavy, but there was a stride in my movement. I started to think about how human history, if you zoom far enough away from it, is just a bunch of guys chucking spears at deer and then running them down until they die. The trees had grown thick enough to block out the housing projects. It felt like I was far away from anything Soviet, like I was in the heart of nature. A thought about how I would fare among my hunter-gatherer ancestors started to brew in my mind, but it was smacked out of my head. The neon man punched me in the jaw. I barely kept my balance after the hit. He silently ran along me, his reflective glasses aimed straight at me. I warned you! I warned you! I warned you! He screamed, mixing in some spittle into the drizzle that was hitting me. Why? I managed to squeeze out before the pain properly spread through my jaw. This seemed to make him furious. He huffed and sprinted off around the corner. This was assault. I stopped and started searching for my phone. Reaching for the cops was my immediate response. The last time I'd been in a fistfight was in elementary school, and it did not go over well. I tried to get past my lock screen to dial, but before I could enter my PIN, I was shoved. Somehow he had managed to get behind me. The man was shockingly strong. As shrimpy as his arms were, his push managed to lift me off my feet and send me tumbling towards the tree line. A flurry of pain spread through my body as I landed. I warned you! I warned you! I warned you! He started to stomp in place again, his head trained squarely on me. The cops weren't coming. This man was clearly unstable, and anything that came out of my mouth was making him more agitated. Out of a mixture of fear and social anxiety, I nodded my head. Even though I didn't say anything, the neon man's stomping grew even more frantic. He ran off once again. There was no way I was going back down that jogging trail. Whatever his running route was, I wanted to be as far away as possible. I opted to cut through the trees and make my way towards civilization by popping out among the bus lanes. The little that I knew about this man was that he did not like me running, so I made my way through the trees with the fastest limp I could muster. Whatever feeling of oneness with nature I had faded. I wanted nothing more but to be back in my home, frying my brain on the web and soothing my lungs with cigarettes. The forest seemed to stretch on for ages. What was worse, I was sure he was following me. As I limped past all the branches that littered the floor, I could see flashes of an obnoxious green out of the corner of my eye. I started to hear the cracking of sticks coming from behind me, yet I also heard a car passing somewhere beyond the trees in front of me. I was near the edge of the park. I could get away from him if I moved fast enough. I ran for it. Bad idea. As soon as I took a couple painful leaps, I was swiped to the side by a giant branch which the neon man held. I landed face down into a bunch of leaves and mud. "I warned you, I warned you, I warned you!" he howled behind me. I couldn't answer. I couldn't scream. I couldn't breathe. He knocked the breath out of me. But before that thought managed to fully connect with my brain, my lower half was weighed down with crushing pain. He was standing on my legs. "I want you!" He slurred the words, keeping their sound but losing their meaning. I tried to squirm, but his heavy body kept my legs pinned to the ground. All my attempts at yelling for help turned into painful squeals. He stomped his way up my back. "I want you!" Adrenaline was kicking in. Every muscle in my body tensed. My lizard brain was taking control. I managed to turn my head. I could see his foot raising above my skull. A layer of mud kept 2 loose leaves on the bottom of his running shoe. This is where my memory becomes patchy. Whatever short circuit my mind pulled, I wasn't in control. I remember the sensation of wrapping my fingers over a tree branch, the thwack of that branch hitting the neon man, and then standing above him, swinging away. I don't know how many times I hit him. All I know is by the time I was done, the branch was broken. His glasses were smashed. His face was cut up. He wasn't moving. I had beaten a strange, unstable man to death with a tree branch. This was not the primal experience I came to the park for. I took out my phone and reconsidered calling the police. Surely there were cameras somewhere in the park. I had acted in self-defense, yet there was a dozen serialized dramas about people going to jail for a crime they didn't commit that filled my head. I didn't have to spend too long on my moral quandary though. The neon man started to move. As if he was a baby coming back from a nap, he rolled from side to side, slowly growing in intensity. I started to back away. The man looked entirely too energetic for just receiving severe head trauma. He started to growl. His rocking grew in intensity. Within seconds, he was back on his feet. A pair of gray eyes, completely void of meaning or life. They stared daggers into my heart. He roared. I ran. My body went into full flight mode. I saw the world in a tunnel, and that tunnel led towards the final trees of the park. My mind was completely clear. The universe was distilled into me, the tree line of freedom, and the slowly growing neon glow behind me. I pushed as hard as I could. There was no pain. There was no sound, only the tree line and the neon light. As soon as I broke out of the park, I was greeted by a deafening horn of a bus. I narrowly missed the headlights. The neon man didn't. His body flew a good 10 meters as soon as it connected with the bus. It bounced across the concrete, shedding a shoe in the process. The neon man lay on the road motionless, covered in scarlet. I ran away as fast as I could. I thought sharing this would make me feel better, that putting down the story on paper would make everything sound saner. But it didn't. My body is covered in bruises and it hurts to breathe. There is nothing that could make me go back to the park or take another stab at running. If being the master of my own destiny means I will have to see the neon man again, I will happily accept servitude. I'm not leaving this apartment for the foreseeable future. You know what's the worst part? It's as if the neon man never got hit by the bus. I can see the spot where it happened right outside of my window. There's no cops, there's no chalk outlines, even the shoe is gone. He's still there. He's still waiting. He's still running. I need a cigarette. We'll return to our regularly scheduled programming after a brief thank you to the sponsors of this madness, the patrons. Huge thanks to Bob Condor, Dante Kincaid, Joyce, Matt, Mr. Creepypasta, Paul Evans, Shion, and Benoit Chaminot for supporting the Cabinet of Fever Dreams. If you'd like to join these illustrious patrons of the Bohemian Arts, drop by patreon.com/MikeJLanger. And now, back to our regularly scheduled programming, the second chapter of the Neon Man Trilogy. I haven't had a good start to the year. I posted up here a while back about my New Year's resolution to start jogging and stop smoking. My attempt at becoming a jogger ended up with me almost having my head stomped in by a mysterious man in a neon green jogging suit. After nearly dying, I picked up smoking back as a crutch. I thought that I'd tobacco therapy my way out of the first week of shock, but here we are, mid-February, and I'm still doing a pack a day. The past couple of weeks have been bad. My whole body ached from the stomping that the neon man gave me. I was doubting my sanity about the whole experience. There was a comic book commission that I was meant to be working on, yet the only thing that I could draw was him. A sketch pad full of a dwarfish creature dressed up in tight neon. Whatever I tried to do, I couldn't focus. Every show I watched turned into background noise. Dinners would go half-cooked. Days started to blur into each other. My mind had gone to dark places before, but not like this. I kept on hearing Stumpy speedwalking behind me. His yells howled outside of my window nightly. I was knee-deep in a mental breakdown. So, I downloaded Tinder. Now, I know, getting into the dating scene because you're considering psychiatric help might not seem like the brightest idea, but there's a logic behind it. I'm a really obsessive person. Be that in replaying the neon man's horrible shrieks in my head, or in relationships. I figured that maybe if I had someone's text so overanalyzed, I would forget about the neon man. Her name was Alice. She radiated joy like a searchlight with a smiley face on it, and she was really into running. In January, I had overzealously liked a bunch of running magazine pages. Apparently that was our shared interest. We chatted about our shared love of running, but soon moved on to more personal topics. Within a week, our conversations would span the entire day and would only end when we were both going to sleep. We made a real bond, even if it was based on me lying about my running habits. I wish I had been more honest with Alice. I wish I told her I don't read joggers daily, that I can't run for longer than 5 minutes without feeling like puking, that I smoked a pack a day. Because even with everything that happened, I still like this girl. I still feel like we could have had a future together. I just wish my path towards her didn't lead through the neon man. I came in 30 minutes early, hoping to get my hands on some liquid confidence and possibly cancel the date if I saw any neon suits. The place that we had decided to meet at was a pub near the edge of my neighborhood. The table I chose had a clear view of the park. If the neon man was to show up, there would be ample warning for escape. It was the first time I left the apartment since my jogging attempt, and outside of the initial anxiety of leaving the house, the whole experience was surprisingly calming. Well, calming from the sense that by the second drink I was more scared of Alice than the neon man. We had chatted so long that it felt like I already had a legitimate relationship with this person. Normally strangers don't talk until 3 a.m. on a nightly basis. I was scared that whatever we had through the phones would fall away as soon as we met. That all my character flaws would become glaringly obvious and that she would be an anti-Semite or something. After 5 minutes of meeting her, all of my fears were at ease. Alice was as cheery in person as she was in chat. We clicked as if we were lifelong friends and not strangers who chose each other with their thumbs. We chatted about how similar drawing and running are, how they both serve as a helpful outlet for daily stress. I told her how art helps manage my mood swings. She told me how running soothes her anxiety. A horde of butterflies was massaging my stomach. She asked to see my art. I showed her my online portfolio. As she scrolled through the website, she started asking about how a freelance artist makes money. The commission system didn't seem lucrative enough, and it isn't. So I threw in a lie about also designing a logo for a French energy drink company. Super local drink. She probably never heard of it. I made a mental note to make that my last lie. I wanted the relationship to continue on honest terms. "Ooh, I really like this one. Is this little squirmer based on anything?" she asked, pointing to a sketch of the neon man I drew in the midst of my breakdown. I lied again. She didn't push the question further. She scrolled through the portfolio for a bit and then closed down her phone. She told me she thought I was talented. Without thinking, I asked her if she wanted to go check out some more artwork that I had in my apartment. It took her a while to stop laughing. Apparently my face had turned scarlet as soon as I asked. Finally, she said yes. But there was a park she had been eyeing out of the window the whole night. Would I mind a spontaneous midnight jog? Even while I jogged next to her, I didn't think about the neon man. All I was concerned with was how my horrible pace might make her disgusted with me. But it didn't. She kept on matching my speed without bringing any judgment into it. Running next to her actually made the clumps of tar in my lungs feel lighter. I barely coughed. We started to move deeper into the park, towards the reservoir where the ducks would occasionally hang out during the summer. There was a lull in the conversation, and I decided to ask her the question that every girl wants to hear on her Tinder date. "Are you not scared of running in the park in the middle of the night?" It took me 3 breaths to ask the question. She laughed and responded within 1. Apparently, I didn't give off a threatening vibe, and if anyone was lurking in the park, she had half a decade of martial arts experience on hand. She asked if I had any reservations about my own safety during a midnight run. What would I do if someone jumped out and tried robbing us? I told her that since I have zero capacity for self-defense, I would probably just run away. A slip of unplanned honesty. Alice laughed. She asked me if I wanted to race around the reservoir. Laughing was too much of a burden on my lungs. Instead, I choked out a series of coughs. By the time I realized her challenge was not a joke, she was already leagues ahead of me. Challenging someone who was clearly out of their element to a race was a pretty shitty thing to do, but Alice did mention she had a competitive streak. Not to say that she could do anything wrong at this point. I was already visualizing how I'd meet her parents. Alice quickly made her way down the jogging path, occasionally running backwards to underline just how much faster she was than me. As she gracefully ran, I wondered how soon we'd move in together. She waved at me from the other side of the reservoir. Then, she was gone. Complete darkness. All of the lampposts that were illuminating the park had gone out. A faint dim of housing project windows shone beyond the trees, but the park was covered in a still blackness. I yelled for Alice, my voice strained from sudden unease. No response. I yelled again, trying to sound as brave as possible, but my voice kept on squealing. This time, there was a response. Any thought of Alice disappeared. I could recognize the howl anywhere. It was the neon man. I sped up. The way around the reservoir was the fastest route. Anything else would be taking me through way too much of the park. My stomach churned and my heartbeat lifted to my ears, but I was moving much faster. I kept on looking behind me, but there were only the dark silhouettes of trees and exercise equipment. I figured I could get past the reservoir, jump out of the park and onto the street and make my way back to my apartment. The thought of escape kept some semblance of sanity in me. Out of the trees came a garish green light. The neon man moved towards me in a brisk jog. His stubby little limbs made him look like a rotisserie chicken. An immensely angry rotisserie chicken. There was no way that I could outrun him. The distance that I covered in a minute was trotted over in seconds. As he got closer, he reached into his pocket and took something out. A metal object glistened in his hand. It wasn't a thought process. The thoughts came after. I jumped down the reservoir and started to wade my way through to the other side. Somewhere in the back of my head, I figured that I would be safe if I was in the water. I thought that maybe the neon man wouldn't follow me if he had to swim. The water was up to my knees. I quickly trudged my way over to the sensor. The reservoir was frigid. I wanted to shout for help, wake up the whole neighborhood, but my voice cords were completely seized up from cold shock. The neon man stopped and watched as I struggled my way into the center of the artificial lake. The water stayed at my knees. As I got further into the reservoir, it became obvious that the water wouldn't go deeper. The neon man watched me all the way to the impotent center of the reservoir. I want you! I turned around, knowing that I'm trapped, knowing that there is no help coming. I tried to reason with the neon man. I asked him why he was following me, why he was so enraged by the idea of me jogging, why was it specifically me that he felt the need to attack? As I squealed out my questions, he simply watched. When he saw that I had run out of things to say, he took a deep breath. I warned you, he said with a stomp. I warned you. Another stomp. I warned you, I warned you, I warned you. His stomping had morphed into a jog. He stepped into the water. His yelling got more manic as he got closer. He moved in a steady, splashing trot. I started to back up. I warned you, I warned you, I warned you, I warned you. He was speeding up. I couldn't feel my toes, but every step I took was guided with a fire in my abdomen. I sloshed my way through, kicking up mud. If I could get to the edge of the reservoir, I could run. There was still the slightest chance of escape. I managed to get on solid ground, but my inability to feel my legs and the mud on my shoes got the best of me. Within 3 steps I fell. My knee spit out a nasty stream of red. He was right behind me. The object in his hands was clear now. A switchblade. I tried to clamber up, but he quickly stomped down on my foot. The weight of his pudgy little body kept me pinned to the ground. I thought about Alice. As the blade circled in front of me, I only thought about Alice. Bzzz. The neon man shook for a moment, and then he got knocked to the ground. It took me a second to recognize what was happening. Alice, taser in one hand and fist in the other, was beating the living shit out of the neon man. After a couple of brutal blows to the back of his head, she got him in some sort of a chokehold. All the while she was yelling something. I couldn't hear her past my own heartbeat. The knife! His knife! Take the knife! I heard as I finally descended back into reality. He was still screeching, but she seemed to have a good hold on him. I grabbed the knife and limply held it in my hands. Good, now call the cops. The whole thing went by like a sort of dream. Seeing the weird blob of a man who nearly killed me twice struggle on the ground felt absurd. Soon his neon green tracksuit was covered in mud. He looked like a radioactive pig being held down by the most beautiful woman in the world. The cops came. They took our statements, put the neon man in cuffs, and shoved him in the back of a cruiser. We both explained that we didn't know the man, but that he came at me with a knife. His switchblade was taken as evidence, and we were given assurances that he would be punished. As we talked to the police, their car kept on rocking back and forth. He was kicking at the door, howling. I want you! They took him away. Alice wanted to go home. The night had proved a bit too intense. Yet as she started Googling for ways to get back to her apartment, she realized she needed to pee. I invited her over to use my facilities while she waited for her Uber. When she asked me about the neon man, I didn't have the heart to tell her the truth. Telling her that I knew the man from before, that he had attacked me, that he made me give up on running, not only made me sound like a crazy person, but it also cemented my status as a liar. She thought he was a random crazy person with a knife, so I let him remain a random crazy person with a knife. She knew something was wrong though. The neon man blew up whatever chemistry we had earlier. I cleared my apartment less thoroughly than I thought. There were clothes all over the floor, pizza boxes stacked in every corner, and an overfilled ashtray in the living room. I told Alice I had a brother who smoked a lot. She asked me why I never mentioned him before. I shrugged. As she peed, I could feel my relationship with her slipping away. Whatever warm feeling she gave me in my abdomen was now replaced with dry ice. I couldn't let it end like this. As soon as she came out of the bathroom, I told her the truth. I told her about the Neon Man, and how I don't run, and how I'm a chain smoker, and how I barely make rent with the art that I make. I confessed to every single lie I told her throughout our short-lived relationship. But along with the confession, I also made a promise. I promised that I would be the person that I pretended to be when we first talked. Somewhere inside of me, beneath all the lies and posturing, there was someone who could do better. I would quit smoking. I would start running. I would try to figure out a way to have a stable career. I would be better. I just didn't want to lose her. It took her all by surprise. She stood in the door of my bathroom processing everything that I had just thrown at her. Finally, she told me I didn't have to lie to her. Then she listed off a bunch of positive adjectives that my self-loathing wouldn't let me remember. She liked me, she said. But she couldn't get involved with another compulsive liar. We could stay friends, maybe go for a jog someday. Outside of the attempted murder and blanket of deceit, she had a good night. After she said that, she grabbed her Uber and rode off. Alice made me promise to go to the police about the original assault, so I guess that's what I'll be doing tomorrow. It's been a while, but there's bound to be some camera evidence that could take the Neon Man out of my life. I shouldn't be improving myself for Alice. That couldn't possibly be healthy, but I will. We'll be friends, and maybe, somewhere down the line, I'll actually be the person that she fell in like with. Maybe I still have a shot. I want to get my shit together. And starting tomorrow I will, but for now, I could really use a cigarette. Is your life missing excitement? Do you yearn to shiver in fear whenever you connect your AirPods? Is the world not scary enough for you? These are strange problems to have. Consider yourself lucky that there's a solution. The Cabinet of Fever Dreams is available on any of your podcast platforms of choice. Tune in today for uncountable hours of entertainment and fear. Find the Cabinet of Fever Dreams on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you like to listen to your spooky stories. And now, back to our regularly scheduled programming, the final chapter of the Neon Man Trilogy. I never thought I would post here again. The Neon Man chapter of my life was meant to be over. Throughout the years, the image of the dwarfish man in bright green spandex has floated out of my mind, but it came back last night with overwhelming terror. 6 years ago, I posted here about the Neon Man. I was a struggling artist stuck in a rut. I decided I would try to indulge in some self-improvement, quitting smoking and starting to run regularly. That's when he appeared. The Neon Man chased me whenever I tried to jog, screeching all the way, seeking to kill me if that meant an end to my physical exercise. After my first violent meeting with the Neon Man, where he almost stomped my head in, I retreated to my apartment and fell into a deep state of constant anxiety. A week later, trying to escape my nightmares of the Neon Man, I went out on a date. That date went horribly wrong. Just when it looked like my neurotic loneliness might be alleviated, the Neon Man stepped in. He ruined my chances at a life with Alice, but he also managed to get himself arrested. Even though me and Alice would never be an item, she helped me deal with the fallout of the Neon Man's presence in my life. I promised her that I would go to the police to give them more information about the Neon Man, that I would tell them about how he tried to murder me before the night he got arrested. So that's what I did. Turns out this was not the first time he had attacked someone. With the reports of other victims, the Neon Man was sentenced to jail. I didn't pay attention to the case. I wanted any memory of him out of my life. Alice, however, kept tabs on the Neon Man's fate. She did help catch him after all. As the trial went on, she would text me updates. Within a month of the night that the Neon Man pulled a switchblade on me, he was in prison. The calmness from the monster being locked away took a couple of weeks to set in. It still felt like the harm that he wanted to do to me transcended prison bars, as if there was no running away from him. But as the weeks dragged on, and as Alice assured me that he was indeed locked away, my mind started to wander from fear to hope. I had made promises to Alice. I was going to keep my word. I told her I would quit smoking, and I had managed to stick to that promise. Aside from the most restless nights, I kept my lungs completely clear. The morning coughs disappeared, the cravings started to get more manageable. I felt like I could walk up a flight of stairs without having to sit down. I had regained enough of my lungs to be able to commit to jogging regularly. All I needed was the courage to do so. My first run after the Neon Man's arrest is the bravest thing I have ever done. Sure, I chickened out multiple times. 2 of my runs ended shortly after they began on account of me vomiting my nervousness away before I even left the house. Yet eventually, the hopeless horror of meeting the Neon Man turned into a manageable worry. I got no pleasure from the first run. The whole time that I was moving through the park, I kept on checking around my shoulder for flashes of neon. I kept on looking for ways to escape if he ever appeared. But he didn't. I ran for a full 3 kilometers before my legs gave out. The idea that I had to stop running out of exhaustion rather than fear was sublime. With the coming weeks, that pleasant feeling became a regular occurrence. Self-help books talk about how self-improvement is a constant battle against ourselves, that making a lasting change in our lives is something that gets easier over time. They say that the voices that make us want to sit down and do nothing all day, the parts of ourselves that crave comfort over effort, die down. They're wrong. Those voices remain. The drive to avoid exercise in lieu of binging TV shows still sticks around. The siren call of trading tomorrow's clear head for a joyous night of drinking still rings alluring. And on a long enough time scale of doing the right thing, you become strong enough to resist the urge to give up. Over the years, I've stumbled a lot. I took breaks from running. I tarred up my lungs for a couple of weekends, but I kept coming back on track. When I was being active, I was a better version of myself. I was the guy I pretended to be when I first met Alice. I slept better, I ate better, I was able to get more art done, but most importantly, I was happier. Even the most bizarre of lies I told Alice the first night became true. I had made a fair amount of money off of designing the logo for an energy drink company. If you're in Central Europe, you probably know the drink that I'm talking about. It's the one with a guy in a neon tracksuit on the can. I originally got contacted about the job after someone saw my drawing of the Neon Man in my portfolio. I didn't feel completely comfortable with having to be faced with that drawing on a regular basis, but I was too hungry of an artist to say no, and by the time the marketing department was done with the design, the only thing that connected me and the art on the can was a paycheck. The pudgy man in ill-fitting jogging gear had turned into an Olympian-looking athlete with a look of joyous determination. I liked drawing that guy more. He didn't give off a murderer vibe. After about a year of working with energy drink people, I got an invitation to come to Prague. They were sponsoring a night marathon that was going to be filled up with a lot of the promotional material I designed. They heard I liked running. I was down for the challenge. I extended my runs. I watched what I ate. My sleeping schedule became draconian. I was going to run this marathon for the guy who once made an overzealous New Year's resolution. With enough training, I could do it. My 2 feet were made for running. Little did I know that before I even reached the starting line, I would meet the creature of nightmares past. I would meet the Neon Man. 2 days before I was meant to leave for Prague, my nerves got to me. I had trained for almost a year specifically for the occasion, but 42 kilometers was a lot. My search history became filled with, "Is it healthy to run a marathon?" and "What can go wrong during a marathon?" The thought of collapsing in front of a crowd haunted me. Yet my worries about the marathon quickly dissipated when I got a text from Alice. She wished me good luck on the run, but she also wanted to give me an update on our mutual friend. The Neon Man had gotten out of prison. He had served his 6 years. I immediately looked out at the park, expecting to see him. The park was empty. Yet I knew that the Neon Man was out there somewhere. I thanked Alice for the update and made a joke about how I hope that the Neon Man doesn't run marathons. But it wasn't a joke. Whatever fears I had about vomiting during the race were now replaced with a singular image of the Neon Man. He wouldn't like what I'd been doing while he was away. I had a train to Prague at 2 in the morning the next day. I was meant to be sleeping, getting rest so that I could be ready for my biggest day as a runner, but instead I spent the whole night thinking about that fat monster. I couldn't sleep. Popping some tablets didn't help either, just made me more loopy. The sunrise came and went. My thoughts were wholly occupied by the Neon Man. Every sound in my apartment, every noise outside carried within it his howl. I laid down and took deep breaths. When I woke up, the dark room wrapped me up in a panic. I overslept. I was going to miss my train. The original plan was to take the bus to the train station and save some money, but there was no way I could make the train in time using public transport. I snagged an Uber. Luckily, getting one of those drivers that you are terrified with on a normal day, but who you cheer on when you're in a hurry. We barely made the train station on time. As soon as the car stopped, I launched through the train station. The train was set to leave in a minute, and I was set on leaving with it. The years of training had paid off. I managed to dash my way past all the shady night commuters and get to the platform just as the doors were closing. I collapsed in my seat and tried to catch my breath. The train started to crawl forward as I enjoyed my little victory. I managed to sprint my way to a train I was meant to miss. I was going to do all right in a marathon. Then, I heard it. That unmistakable sound. It was faint, but it was there. The neon man was yelling from outside of the train. I pressed my face against the window, looking for some hint of him on the platform. At first, the only neon I could see was on the uniform of the station cleaner, but after a couple of moments, the neon man didn't change a bit. He was still built like a small furnace with baby limbs. His sunglasses still kept the outside world locked away. He was still angry. As the train started to gather speed, he kept up his pace. His head stayed aimed directly at me. The train had reached a speed that no person could match, but the neon man still held firm. A conductor got in his path and was swiftly thrown to the side. We passed the edge of the station, but that made no difference to the neon man. He swooped himself over the railing and continued running beside the train. He wouldn't look away from me. We hit a tunnel. I stared at my reflection in the window as we sped through the dimly lit passage. We were moving so fast that the graffiti scrawled on the walls turned from words into a general impression of angst, of a terrifying, baffling existence. Who was he? Why was he after me? Most importantly though, where was he? A flash of light. We were out of the tunnel. I stared out of the window, expecting to see the neon man come trotting by the train, but all I was greeted with was moonlit fields intercut by a sleepy highway. I searched every carriage, knocked on every bathroom door, and even peeked into a couple of luggage compartments. He wasn't outside, and he wasn't in the train. I slouched back into my seat and tried to calm down. The message I wanted to send to Alice went through a couple of drafts before I deleted it. It all seemed too insane. I was a grown-ass adult who was scared of some psycho in a garish running suit. All I had to do was show up at the nearest police station, report my suspicions, and then let the whole neon man thing go to rest. By the time I would arrive in Prague, there would be a good 400 kilometers between us. I took out my sketchpad and tried drawing. I figured that maybe doodling something and scratching at the creative part of my brain would help distract me. Yet fear burrows itself into places you can't control. All I could draw were pictures of wounded animals as strange figures in distressing spandex. I kept on dropping my pencil. My hands would occasionally erupt in a wave of trembling. My nerves were getting the best of me, but I was also so tired. The train still had 4 hours to go. I closed my eyes. It took me a second to realize where I was when I woke up. The exhaustion and lack of sleep had finally caught up with me. Must have been out cold when people were clearing out. I put on my backpack, grabbed my drawing supplies, and made my way off the empty train. I had hoped the station would be more populated. There is, after all, some safety in numbers. But 5 in the morning is both too late and too early for crowds. The platform was almost completely empty. The only other living souls I could see was a group of downtrodden-looking guys nodding off and a lone train conductor. I slowly made my way towards the escalator that would take me down to the station proper. My eyes kept on darting for a hint of green. The neon man was meant to be far away, but I had spent enough time obsessing about his meaty visage to know that distance meant nothing to him. The station loomed over me, a jagged metal cage waiting to lock me up with my worst nightmare. I scanned past the trash containers and panicked. A flash of neon green. I grabbed my belongings as tightly as I could and broke into a sprint. It wasn't until I turned around that I saw the real source of the color, the station cleaner. but by then it was too late. I was already in a mad sprint. My body had gone into full flight mode. I sprinted down the escalators. The hallway beneath the Prague train station is a long slog of uneven tile, but my feet bounced off of it as if it was the smoothest jogging path in the world. My panic had me on a leash, running down a tunnel vision world, but as my mind cleared, I started to slow. Where was I running to? Why was I running? A recollection of constant police presence in the park outside of the station gave me a concrete destination. I would go to the cops, report what happened, and then make my way over to my hostel. Literally running up to them would have made me seem like a crazy person, so I stopped running. Yet they would see me run regardless. Before I could even gather my breath from the initial sprint, I heard it. A scream that reverberated through the entire underground straight to my heart. From the far side of the passageway, I could see him. A pudgy green madman heading straight towards me. The tunnel vision returned. The entirety of my existence was melted down to a single thought. Escape. The main hall of the station was sparsely populated by strung-out looking homeless people and sleepy looking tourists. But as soon as we raced past them, they got energized. It's not every day that you see someone getting chased by someone in a neon green jogging suit. A splattering of tired faces turning to shock flashed past me. Everyone took a step back, not one to interfere in our business. Everyone but a gaunt-looking vagrant next to the arrivals board. As I ran towards him, a look of recognition flashed across his face. He started following us. I didn't have the time to concern myself with him. The neon man's howl were getting so close I could barely think. I wanted to put on another burst of speed, but my legs couldn't move any faster. My bag and art supplies slid from my hands. The only thing that mattered was survival. A thud sounded off behind me. The neon man had hit the ground head first. His neck bended at an inhuman angle, and a spray of blood from his mouth spritzed the dirty tiles of the station. A pair of my pencils rested by his feet. For a second, he looked like a corpse. Like someone who had suffered a horrible accident. But before the possibility of him being dead properly settled in my brain, his body started to twist. He started to rock on the ground, back and forth, emanating a guttural sound from his crushed throat. The vagrant we had passed in the hallway was still in hot pursuit. He was dressed in tattered clothing which had clearly seen its fair share of winters, but he moved with the focus of a professional athlete. He sprinted towards me, screaming, "Get away! Run! Run!" He didn't have to tell me twice. The automatic doors to the train station were right in front of me. A group of 6 officers stood on the other side next to 2 police vans. As the doors labored open, I managed one last look behind me. The neon man sprung back to his feet. His head was drooping to the side, but he still managed to move with impeccable speed. The vagrant wasn't far behind. The doors finally slid open. I ran out to the police, screaming for help. Eyebrows were raised, cigarettes were puffed on. I could barely register their confusion before I got knocked to the ground. The neon man straddled me, his weight cutting off any chance at breathing. I could see a terrified reflection in his glasses. Some of the police started to move towards us, but then he pulled out a knife. They pulled out their guns and took a step back. A cacophony of screams to put down the knife rang through the park, but they were all drowned out by something much louder. He raised the knife above his head, readying it for a plunge. I never got to say goodbye to Alice. I closed my eyes and waited for a terminal stab wound. The neon man would finally get his revenge. But it never came. Instead, there was a thud, followed by the sound of my own gasps. The weight on my chest was suddenly gone. The neon man had been tackled by the mysterious vagrant. The vagrant laid a flurry of blows to the neon man's head as the knife tumbled away towards me. I crawled away as fast as I could. With the knife out of the equation, the police were brave enough to jump on the 2 fighting eccentrics. Massive violence formed in front of the train station. In its center, the neon man and the vagrant. Surrounding them, half a dozen cops with batons. I leaned up against one of the vans and watched everything unravel. The police smacked the 2 with batons while screaming unintelligible commands. Flashes of neon-clad swings and kicks could be seen in the scuffle, but soon both the neon man and the vagrant became immobile. They were both out cold. The police put them both in cuffs and dragged them to separate vans. A small pool of blood and spit remained where the beating took place. I raced towards a group of police, dragging the vagrant, and stammered through an explanation of his innocence. I told the police that the vagrant meant no harm, that he was saving me from the Neon Man, but I was told to stand to the side and let them do their job. As they started to load him into the van, he woke up. His eyes drifted towards me, and through broken teeth he spoke. "I know him. He will always chase. He will never stop. Unless you stop him, he will always chase. Always chase. Always chase." I pleaded for the police to let me talk to the man, but they moved me away from the van in which he was held. One of the officers took me aside to question me about the situation. He did not care about my past with the Neon Man, how I was assaulted 6 years prior, how the Neon Man had recently been released from prison, or how he chased my train before I arrived in Prague. All he cared about was the knife. No one could find it. The vagrant and the Neon Man were being attended to in their separate vans. The sun was slowly rising off in the distance, and Prague was starting to wake up. The exhaustion was starting to set in, but I kept on hoping for a chance to speak to the mysterious vagrant. I needed to know what he knew about the Neon Man. I needed to know how to get the Neon Man out of my life for good. One of the younger policemen offered me a cigarette. With a glint of hesitation, I declined. I was meant to run a marathon in the evening after all. I explained my situation to him, as calmly as I could, and asked whether there was any chance that I could speak to the vagrant. He seemed somewhat entertained by my story. He told me he would check again with a supervisor. I was hopeful. The Neon Man had been arrested once more, and I finally had a shot at finding out what all this madness was about. Early morning travelers started to flow in to the train station. The stolen perfume peddlers were enjoying the preoccupation of the police. My horror of the Neon Man was starting to get replaced with a gentle anxiety about getting enough sleep to run in the marathon. That's when I heard the thuds. The police van, into which the Neon Man had been dragged, started to rock from side to side. Something was happening. Thud, thud, thud. The door slid open. I was expecting a policeman to walk out, but instead, 2 bright green legs dangled out of the van. The glasses were gone. I could see his gray, hate-filled eyes clearly. He glared into my soul for a moment, sending a hot gust of rage down my spine, but his eyes quickly darted towards my pocket. He knew I picked up his switchblade. The Neon Man jumped from the police van towards the ground. His hands were still handcuffed around his back, but he moved towards me like a wolf moved towards a doe with broken legs. He had his prey picked out. A policeman with a bloody nose jumped out of the van, yelling for the Neon Man to lie down on the floor. He had his gun out. His colleagues joined him in the screaming and gun wielding. The Neon Man, as if realizing he was outmatched, stopped moving towards me. He straightened up his head towards the sky, clearly struggling from his previous neck injury, and let out one last howl. Then he broke into a sprint and ran deep into the park that surrounded the train station. 2 policemen chased after him, but as soon as it became clear that they couldn't match his pace, the vans joined the chase. I waited in the park for half an hour, thumbing the stolen switchblade in my pocket, but no one came back. The police were off chasing the Neon Man, and I was left without answers next to a pool of blood and spittle. I went to my hostel. I needed to get rest before I figured out what to do next. As I write this, I'm getting ready to head out for the starting line of the marathon. When asked Alice, she insisted that I don't go, that I wait to make sure that the Neon Man is locked away for good, but I simply can't do that. The past 6 years I've lived without the fear of the Neon Man, and the past 6 years have been the best years of my life. I can't go back to being scared. I can't go back to sitting at home all day in fear of a fat man in tights. I can't let myself become the person I was before I started running. Taking care of myself has made me so much more productive, so much healthier, and most importantly, happier. I trained hard for this marathon, and no one can take that away from me. As I strap on my running shoes, I sincerely hope that the police have caught the Neon Man. I pray that he ends up in jail and out of my life, and that the whole concept of this psychotic chase will simply become a memory to recall from my 20s. I need this to be over. But if this isn't over, if the Neon Man decides to chase me during the marathon, I will not run. I have run from him for long enough. I am taking the switchblade with me. This will all end tonight. I am ready to face whatever comes my way. Like the armless domino stacker, I will become the master of my own destiny. Yet as I head out the door, as I reflect on the past 6 years of my life, there's only one thought in my mind. I really need a cigarette. Sup ghouls, it's me, Mike, the guy who writes these stories. Just popping in to say that almost all of the new United People series stories are now finalized and available on the Patreon. All 17 tales are up for the $5 patrons, and 2 of the stories are available for free members as well. Really hoping to get the final 2 knocked out in the next week so that I can move on to working on new projects. I assure you, there's some pretty wild stuff right around the corner. Next week, there will be one final compilation to get you into that United People's Institute mood. A big old jumbo video of the original stories. To make it a bit more algorithm friendly, it'll get a more comprehensible name, but those that know. Come Monday, I'll be organizing the release schedule and putting the finishing touches on the content side of things. Wish me luck and mental fortitude, for writing is fun, but organizing stuff for an algorithm is not. Anywho, that's all from me this week. Hope everyone is safe, sane, and healthy out there. I'll see you next week.